Today, but we're very pleased that Ian Rutherford, who's the Associate Professor from the School of Geography at the University of Melbourne, is going to make a presentation, and he's very much in dialogue with Rob, so it will follow what Rob is going to say. So thanks very much, Ian.
Thanks for that introduction, and again apologies on behalf of Rob. Now, I actually happen to have some psychic powers, and so I know what you're thinking already. You're thinking two things. The first one is, this guy must be a genius. The way that he's identified the relationship between those two words, principle and principle. I know you've never seen that in a talk before, is that right? But that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you're thinking, here's another guy who's about to tell us something else we should feel guilty about for not cramming into the curriculum. And I know that my wife has told me this. She said, most problems in the world are the fault of the government, most of the federal government, apparently. And the second is principals, school principals, not doing everything that everybody demands of them. And so the good news today is, I'm interested in sustainability, and I'm talking here about environmental, social sustainability, but part of that is the sustainability of you as principals in completing your role. So my intention today is not to try to add another burden to your full lives and responsibilities, but to introduce some principles around sustainability and some ways to achieve it effectively. So let's begin. I want you to imagine for a moment that a student from your school has graduated and has gone to get a job in a bank. And another student, let's say from a school, from a state that doesn't emphasise sustainability, somewhere like Queensland, and they graduate and go and get a job in a bank as well as two students. And those banks are making loans to farmers in Western Queensland. And those farmers are at the moment, as you know, in the middle of a drought, a very severe drought. Now the Queensland student who's working in that company knows that the farmers are falling behind in their payments, and goes out to the landholders and says, look, we're concerned about this, we're going to give you some more time to pay your debts, and you're going to have to manage your business so that maybe in another 6 months you can pay off your mortgage and we can keep sustaining our relationship. Now, how does the farmers respond in that situation? So they know they've got to pay in 6 months' time, they've got to get more investment on their property. So typically what happens in Western Queensland, and this is actually a real situation, is that they increase their stocking rate on their properties. And here's the sort of animals that they put on. These are the Brahman cows. They'll increase their stocking rate because they know they've got to get the more weight onto those animals so they can sell them and then get more product to market, and then they can pay the bank off sometime in the future, maybe in a year's time. The consequence of that is that the pasture is damaged, and research that we've been involved in up in there with CSIRO that relates this is rainfall, this is the average ground cover, and ground cover is gold in this region. And you can see that this is the Weenie Creek experimental catchment we're involved with. This is an adjacent property. So what this graph shows is that as the rainfall comes back, this is after the last drought, this is the property that had grazing management, and this is the one that didn't. This is the one, the green line is the property where they increased their stocking rates in response to the bank's demands. The result of that is these two different properties here. This is the experimental one on the right. The pasture comes back. On the left it doesn't. And the consequence of this is gullying, actually. There's erosion of the areas that are overstocked. We get gullying here. And gullying, it turns out, contributes 80% of the sediment and nutrients to the Great Barrier Reef. Here's the plume of sediment going out into the reef and harming the reef. We've all heard about the concerns for the Great Barrier Reef. The fundamental problem in the reef is sediment, nutrients, turbidity. The source of that sediment, nutrients and turbidity is gullying in the catchment. The source of that gullying is overgrazing seasonally. The source of that seasonal overgrazing is pressure from the banks to behave in a particular way. Now, your student, of course, who is engaged in sustainability and well educated in that, goes to the bank and says we should behave differently in this circumstance. We should say to the landholder, spell your land, don't increase your cropping, your stocking rate, and we'll let the pasture grow back. We'll improve your yields actually, because it's shown that if you don't increase the stocking rate, you'll maintain your yields through the dry periods, and in the long term, you'll have a more sustainable property, more sustainable returns to the bank. You'll go to the bank next time and get more loans. We don't have sediment into the reef. We're protecting the reef. Everybody wins in a sense, but we win in the long term. We don't win in the short term. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because this is sustainability. What I'm talking about is social sustainability, professional sustainability, environmental sustainability, and that chain that we're talking about is the sort of sustainability I want to talk about today. Not so much, often when we think about sustainability in schools, we might be thinking about the sort of things, do you put your can in the bin, do you recycle, do you turn your taps off, these sorts of behaviours. Well, in sustainability terms, we want to move beyond that to think about sustainability as personal and professional decisions that we all make and that our students make that maintain intergenerational equity. What that means is that within our generation, in different parts of the planet, in Queensland, wherever, that people have the same opportunities from the use of resources and management of resources on the planet that others have. So this is about fairness, and it's about fairness and maintenance. But we also have intergenerational equity, which is about future generations having access to the reef, being able to graze sustainably, and so on. Now, what's the role of education in this? And that's anecdote I just gave. We can look at this in terms of a range of capacities, if you like, that their students might get. One of those, of course, is technical capacity. So in that anecdote, the student working in the bank, and the professional working in the bank, has to understand the science, which is actually quite complicated, grazing science, and nutrients and chemistry and all that. They have to understand risk, and standing here at Moonee Valley, risk and probability is a powerful tool to avoid losing money in many cases. But fundamentally, we've got to understand the interconnections and the chain of causality between all of those things that I mentioned. And that's a complicated and a demanding thing. It's also about public and private outcomes, understanding the relationship between our private decisions and others in the community. But it's also about an ethical content and context. It's about empathy. It's about, now I'm not expecting principals to be responsible even for teaching empathy, but it is something that comes out of a rich and diverse curriculum. So all of these things are elements of sustainability. Now, I want to make a useful distinction here. When we're talking about sustainability, it's often confusing what we're actually meaning. And so here's a useful distinction for us. One is that we can define two types of sustainability. One is brown. They call them brown environmental issues. And these are issues of sustainability and quality of life. It's about air pollution, water quality, water pollution, disease, sewage, all those sorts of things. These are things that maintain our life. And we also have green sustainability issues, which are really issues of things like biodiversity, some climate change, the animals, all these sorts of global sustainability issues. Now, they're often confused in schools and in the minds of all of us, but when people think they're talking about global biodiversity things, they're really just talking about whether water quality is maintained for my quality of life. And so that's a helpful distinction. Now, students often confuse these, but they also often transit from brown to green issues. When we're in primary school, students will often be interested in those brown issues about quality of life, about I've got to recycle things, we've got to be good stewards, whereas as we go further into education, we'll tend to get more into the sophisticated, complicated green issues, if you like. Now, I want to make a distinction here between deep and shallow sustainability before I get on to some more concrete issues. So by secondary school, we'd be hoping that students would be moving beyond simple actions really into reasons and consequences. The reason and the consequence of doing particular things, personal actions or professional actions. And so here's an example of this. So many of us, and certainly in primary school, for example, students will be told, you should turn the tap off when you're cleaning your teeth. And we have international visitors come and stay with us. They leave the tap on while they clean their teeth, and it drives us mad. I mean, how can you waste water like that? But is that enough? You know, why do you turn the tap off when you're cleaning the teeth? What actually is there about saving water that matters? And I want to make the distinction here between deep and shallow sustainability issues. So just saying, oh, we should turn the tap off because it somehow saves water, which is somehow a good thing. Well, actually, all of us in this room, we use 10 times more water in our lives by the food we eat than whether we turn the taps off for the direct use of water. It's the food that you eat that uses 90% of all the water in your life, and that's because irrigation consumes 90% of all water use in the landscape. So, what's the most effective thing that you can do to save water if you wanted to do that is to become a vegetarian. And that's because meat consumes, of that 90%, most of that water surprisingly goes on irrigated pasture, and irrigated pasture for beef and dairy production. So the most efficient thing you can do if you want to save water is actually not eat meat. Now, you may not want to do that, but that's the reality. Another interesting thing around Melbourne is, what's the most important thing for our water in Melbourne? Is it whether you turn the taps off when you clean your teeth? Well, no, it's not. It's actually whether we have a fire in the catchment of Melbourne. You might all think this is about desal plants. I'm very happy to talk about the desal plant, the North-South pipeline, any of those water issues later on, because water is one of my areas. But interestingly, if you go back to 1939, or in Melbourne, we've got a closed catchment up here. It's one of 3 cities in the world that has a closed water supply catchment. In 1939, that catchment was burned, and it was burned, and our water supply dropped by half. And that's because when you have a big mountain ash forest like this, if you burn it, it's replaced, big old trees are replaced with millions. In fact, 1 tree per hectare is replaced by 1 million seedlings. They pump all the water up into the atmosphere and you don't get as much runoff. The result is that Melbourne's water supply collapsed in 1939. So if you wanted to ask people in management of water in this state, in Melbourne, what are you most concerned about? It's actually fire in the catchment. That's going to devastate your water supply. And part of that is why we have a desal plant. It's actually because of the risk to our water supply from all of these other factors. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because this is the difference between a sort of a facile conception of environmental sustainability, which is, oh, I should save water just because I should. That's fine. But hopefully by the time we get to secondary school, we're starting to move into a more sophisticated, connected understanding of all of these systems, which actually lead to the capacity to make decisions that are much more meaningful. Otherwise, we just believe that our behaviours make a difference. Here's an example of the water yield fall off. So this is average water yield after the 1939 fires. And it's come, and interestingly, as Melbourne's population has increased, so has the water yield, and that's provided all of our water supply. So just an interesting sideline. Now, given this, why should you, as a principal of a school, why should you care about sustainability in the curriculum? Now, I just want to emphasise, when I talk about sustainability, it's not just environmental sustainability, it's also things like population. It's also about social sustainability, about the sustainability of of our system and our way of life. Now, there is a mood around, to some extent, that a lot of these sustainability issues, like global climate change, maybe an invention of hippies and greenies. Well, let me just give an example of the magnitude of human impact that we're dealing with. Now, again, I'm not trying to make everybody feel guilty about everything, existential guilt, but let's have a look at, here's a quiz for you. Yeah, we know that we've got this idea that we're now living in the Anthropocene, that we're now living in a period where humans have as much impact on this planet as geological processes. Now let's just put this into context, and here's a quick quiz. If we take all the mammals on the earth, so think of them all, elephants, kangaroos, I've just been up in the Flinders Ranges and I can tell you there are a lot of dead kangaroos on the road, a big weight of them. If we took all the mammals on earth and we compared them against the weight, their weight, wildebeests, all these animals, and compared them against the weight of humans and the weight of domestic animals, what percentage do you think would be wild animals? Anybody want to hazard a guess? 50%? That much? Well, the answer might surprise you, probably won't surprise you, because if it was a big number, I wouldn't be a good example. But let's have a look. So here's the Earth's land mammals by weight. This one in the middle here is humans. All this light one around here is domestic animals, and these green ones here are all the other animals on Earth. So here's an interesting example. So all of the horses, domestic horses on the planet, weigh as much as all the other wild animals on the planet. Here's elephants down here. They're not that heavy, really. So what that means is 3% of the weight of animals on Earth, if you exclude humans, which is 30%, domestic animals, which is 67%, 3% is wild mammals. Now, that's just one. I could give you many other examples of the magnitude of human impact. My area, which is I work on rivers and water and erosion processes, did you know that all erosion processes on the planet from natural processes were exceeded by human processes in 1750. So we transport now twice as much sediment as coal and iron ore to Japan and China as all natural processes and erosion processes on Australia. So the point I'm making is the magnitude of human impact is monumental. So this idea of sustainability in this context is an important issue. Now, to show my hand here, I'm passionate about sustainability. I work at a university. Now, what's my capacity to influence this question of sustainability? Well, I can educate my students, a few hundred of them a year. That's maybe, I've got some classes with 500 on them, as you know what universities are like these days, they're big factories. Or I can get on government panels and change behaviour, or I can come along to a function like this and essentially get you as the principals to do this work for me. So just to put my cards on the table, you have much more influence on these students than I ever will, because by the time they leave school, that's finished. Sustainability education, that's all I'll get. Now, I'm also interested in geography as a vehicle to achieve that, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So achieving sustainability is something that we can all contribute to, you much more than me. The second reason is that sustainability provides some of the most challenging and satisfying jobs for your students. And this is another issue that's not well understood. We find at the university one of the most frustrating things is you go to Melbourne University, what are you going to do? You're going to do a profession, law, medicine and architecture, which always astonishes me because there's no jobs in architecture. So that's all the students want to do, yet some of the most fascinating jobs and interesting jobs are not in those areas. They're in these areas of sustainability and thinking about the world. And here's an example. Melbourne's growth is a really good example. Melbourne is growing by last year, 95,000 people came to Melbourne last year. It's the fastest growing city in Australia. And that's having huge implications for how the city functions. We feel it every day. But why is our growth rate that high? What is it? It's not an accident. It's actually government policy about immigration. I'm not questioning that. It's a different issue. But this is a fundamental public policy issue about how we manage growth just today, the Chinese government abandoned the one-child policy. You can now have 2 children in China. Their growth rate is 1.2 children per person now. We're now 1.8. We're rapidly growing. That has all sorts of sustainability implications. Now, in terms of jobs, these are the tough and interesting and demanding questions that your students can go on to do. But the problem is they just don't think of these as career paths. We're talking about planning. We're talking about engineering and geography. These sort of disciplines, there are heaps of jobs in these areas, particularly in the public domain. 17% of jobs are in the public sector, but much more than that in the para public sector. So these are extremely interesting problems, and we have all of our students coming out of the geography programs at Melbourne University, they all get jobs. And they get jobs in really interesting and demanding areas, particularly with the boom in spatial science that's going on at the moment. So it's not just about green and environmental issues. I want to make this about sustainability. It's about all of these things. It's not just about hugging trees. Good. The third reason, I've got 4 reasons for you of why we should care about this. And it's one of the new 3 cross-curriculum priorities, both for the Australian curriculum and the new Victorian curriculum. So, as you'll know, this is from the Australian curriculum. These are the learning areas, the general capabilities. The cross-curriculum priorities are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, and sustainability. Now, how do we spread that cross-curriculum priority across all of these things? And we'll talk about that in a moment. So it's actually a responsibility we have to teach that cross-curriculum priority. The 4th reason is, I suspect it's an opportunity to easily differentiate your school from other schools. And now that I've told everybody that, it doesn't really work. But it's without actually too much work, and I'll tell you, well, let's have a look at how we can achieve that. So how do we differentiate? Well, one is it's quite easy to differentiate simply by highlighting the existing sustainability threads through the curriculum, and we'll have a look at that. So how are all the different threads of the curriculum? Simply by identifying how they flow through from maths to English to geography, whatever you're teaching, you can describe your school as having a sustainability emphasis and program, and that's very attractive to students. Sustainability is one of the clear links between STEM and humanities subjects, and so students like to feel they're getting a rounded education, as you know, and this sustainability is a very clear way to get that relationship. Because as I've said, sustainability is not just about science, it's also fundamentally about ethics and about economics and all of those things too. So it also provides an easy hook for field trips. So nothing's easier than going on a field trip and doing sustainability things, where if you've got to do a maths field trip, it might be a bit more difficult. But so that's and as we know, field trips are even though it's packed with OH&S issues, are a good thing to do. Now finally, it provides a clear link between what I'd call the fabric of the school, or the character of your school as a sustainable school, as well as a sustainable curriculum. And this is probably you do most of these things anyway. For example, I know that there's a program called Wise or something. No, I looked at it. What? Waste Wise. Yeah. Now 50% of schools are involved in Waste Wise program, and that's happening already. So all of these things, and then you just need to connect that up with the curriculum, and you've got a differentiation. But it's also some research that shows, and this is not surprising, you'll understand this, that if there's any cognitive dissonance for the students about you're teaching in the curriculum about sustainability, but in your school you're practicing things they clearly think aren't sustainable, then there's some research showing that causes some tension and disillusionment in the students. Actually, this is American research, but where there's inconsistency between teachings and practice has confused students and decreased both the likelihood of emulation and educational effectiveness. The 4 things they identify as contributing that around sustainability in your school property are role models, so the behaviour of teachers, facilities, And you might have, I heard about Maribyrnong School where you've got water tanks, but they're not connected up. Yeah. Is that right? No. No. Oh, anyway. So I might have heard that, but I might be wrong. Yeah. So we've got all these facilities going on. We've got governance issues around inclusive decision making. If you're saying that sustainability is all about this sort of decision making and you're not doing it, then that's a problem. And school culture. So there's some examples of the fabric of the school has to support sustainability. Now, sustainability in the new Victorian curriculum. So sustainability education involves competencies in these multiple subjects: maths, chemistry, history, English, technology, legal studies, economics, ITC. But fundamentally, geography, and I'm speaking now as a Vice President of the Geography Teachers Association, so you won't be surprised that I'm partisan in this. Including plenty of geography is in a lot of ways the easiest ways to tick some of these sustainability boxes that are required. Why is that? First, because it's a great sustainability curriculum and it's a new curriculum. And second, because there's great support for your staff from the Geography Teachers Association. So let's have a look at some of this. So now we're in the advertising phase of the talk, bear with me. And so the new Victorian Geography curriculum, geography remains one of the 8 distinct disciplines in the new curriculum. Sustainability is embedded throughout the curriculum it's one of the 7 principal concepts of the subject. So it's the only subject that actually has sustainability as a core principle throughout its curriculum. And the new VCE curriculum has sustainability as a connecting principle through those 4 things. It's a brand new curriculum. It includes things like hazards, disasters, population, rich in sustainability issues. And in your pack there, you've got these examples of where sustainability in the Victorian curriculum is embedded right through the geography curriculum from 7 right through to 10, actually from foundation right through. And this is some examples. So here, geographies of interconnection. We've got the effects of the production and consumption of goods, effect of people's travel and recreational and leisure choices. So these activities within that curriculum really allow you to build sustainability in with very little work. Just use this and it's done. And to continue, the curriculum from foundation right through to year 10 builds this progression from small scale up to complex social sustainability issues. And the sort of example is when you start the geography curriculum at foundation level, they talk about sustainability within their classroom, within their home, and they progressively scale up to planetary issues as we get to year 10 and beyond. So that avoids this problem of superficial conceptions of sustainability. Now, the structured geography curriculum makes it easy to achieve and report on these achievement standards that you have to report on. I understand, regularly you have to report against these achievement standards. That's all provided in the curriculum. It's easy to do and you can report legitimately and easily against those. There are also options for students between science and humanities. Increasingly, geography is considered a STEM subject. In a lot of this is a real change in the character of geography. For example, my school at University of Melbourne is now in the science faculty. Most geography schools are now moving into science faculties across Australia in universities. And this is driven in a lot by spatial science, by drones and the fact that we're so spatially connected. This is really driving that curriculum, the change to science. And I understand that there's more funding available for STEM subjects now, and that can help with geography as well. Increasingly, geography is being selected as a 6th complementary subject in VCE, so it will be it's seen as a pathway into both humanities and sciences, and that gives you all sorts of benefits. And of course, the new VCE geography curriculum is much more popular, with teachers more engaging and we think better. Now, about geography, so it's interesting that in the UK and the USA, geography is actually booming. So in the A levels in geography in the UK, for the 5th year, entries have risen at A level. It's had the largest percentage increase of all the major subjects in 2015, with candidate numbers rising by 13%, following from a 19% increase in 2013. Enrolment is running higher than national averages, and graduating geographers experience some of the lowest unemployment levels of any degree subjects. And that's for a whole raft of reasons, but a lot of it's about spatial science and about connectivity. This is a quote from RMIT Spatial Science, where they say, at the moment we don't have enough VCE matriculated geography students coming through to the university level. Says Dr. Benno Engels. We hope Year 9 and 10 students will see the value of it at VCE level. The lecturer in global studies, social science and planning says more than 75% of his final year urban planning students will have jobs lined up before they graduate at the end of the year. There's a skills gap. So that's the first thing. So there's curriculum benefits around geography and sustainability, but there's also that the GTAV can help you and your students to achieve this. So geography is growing in strength, and if you want a test of the growing strength of geography, if you put GTAV into Google, last year you used to, what would come up first? Grand Theft Auto 5 was what came up first. Well, now you put it in and the Geography Teachers Association comes up the first 3 places. So I think that's a measure, in fact globally, that's the most important measure of performance. So put in, so you can do your own test, go home and put in GTAV and see what comes up first. It's Australia's leading geography organisation. I've just got involved in this organisation. I was astonished at how big it was. So, for example, at the this one here, the annual conference, 950 teachers came to the annual conference this year. It's by far the biggest geography conference in Australia, bigger than all the academic ones. Also, the GTAV makes sense of the exploding sustainability resources. If I was a teacher working in this sustainability area, there is so much material online, it's overwhelming. And the Geography Teachers Association makes sense of all of that and parcels it in useful ways. It also provides very well-resourced training. So at the annual conference, and so sit back and let them do the sustainability work for you so that your job is more sustainable. And so that's a proposition I put to you. So geography and spatial science, I'll finish on this point. We have Microsoft here today represented, and the fastest growing area of IT in a lot of ways is spatial science. The fact that your phone knows where you are, the fact that everything's spatially defined, this is all about this capacity to have spatial understanding. And the GTAV has developed professional arrangements with multiple spatial organisations such as RMIT and Spatial Vision to facilitate that. And this is the fastest growing area of employment also nationally. And here's an example of a geographer. This is Eltham High School Year 10 student Casey McCormick, won the Stapley Medal for the Planning Institute of Australia for her spatial mapping work. So to finish, my suggestions to you around this, around sustainability as an idea, is that sustainability is a core element of the curriculum. And I'm not just loading another responsibility on you, but it's one that there's good reasons to think about it as a cross-cutting principle that cuts across all of your curriculum and binds it together. Plus it leads to all sorts of interesting and sustainable jobs for your students. And it's easy to reap the benefits of sustainability in the curriculum by differentiating your school, by making it, declaring it as a sustainability school, and let the geography curriculum do that work for you to some extent. It's not everything, because sustainability is much more than that. It's about science, it's about humanities, it's about economics, but the geography curriculum can be a core part of it. It makes it easy for you to deliver the program, and let the GTAV help you as well. And in your brochure, you'll find some careers brochures. You'll find a brochure on the GTAV, and finally, my perception on this as somebody who's extremely interested in sustainability is that the most effective way that we can improve sustainability in the world is through education, and particularly consistent sustainability education through from primary to secondary, so students come out with these rich and complicated competencies that allow them to solve these most fundamental problems of the world. And it's your schools that will achieve that, but to make it sustainable for you as principals, it's easy to use the geography curriculum. It's easier to use the Geography Teachers Association. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Ian. Do we have any questions of Ian? Yes. Could we have a microphone over there, please?
Hello Ian, I'm Barbara Laidlaw from Malorna College. At our school we have two people who have geography method. One is my assistant principal who's retiring in January, and the other person is me. So I'm slightly busy and can't actually take those classes down at school. So I'm just wondering what's happening in academia regarding students coming out and taking geography as a method. We have all history teachers,
yes,
and they're the ones who are trying to deliver it. We've actually managed to get geography into the curriculum twice next year as an elective, and you know, like in the humanities program, actually calling it geography because I guess of the push for sustainability, but we don't have qualified people to actually teach it. And with due respect to the historians, they're not geographers.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're dead right. So, geography of all of the disciplines has the most teachers who aren't trained in the discipline. So 50%, I understand, of teachers teaching geography are not geographers. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. I'll mention two. So the first one is that there's been a dip in geography over the last decade, and that's reflected through, and we're really seeing transition coming through from university. So the number of geography teachers being trained dipped, and it's now coming back up again. The second reason is that most of the geography students actually get jobs outside teaching, and so there is a real demand for their skills, and so fewer of them are going into teaching. Now that's a real disappointment to me, and so we're certainly at the university working with improving both the geography training, but in the meantime, what can we do about this so that we can teach a sustainable geography curriculum? Well, it's the only solution over the next 5 years until this gets resolved is to improve the professional training of those staff that we do have, and also you're quite right about a lot of people who did teach geography in the past are now moving through the system or becoming principals perhaps. So professional training for the GTAV is all we can suggest at the moment. Thanks for the question. Oh, yes, thanks. So Lily's just reminded me that the GTAV is actually developing a certificate of geography competency just for this situation, and so that those teachers can be skilled up in these areas.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ian. Certainly given us some challenges to think about, and that mammal statistic was remarkably alarming. And thank you very much for your presentation.